And this is my job right now, and it has been for the better part of 20 years, or 30. Looking at the global level of these things, and then the national level within it. And of course there is, and we've seen it even this morning, the local content at city level, municipal level, and individual level, and corporate level, is all within this, but the global context is where I start. And we don't have to dwell too far on it, but just to recognize that in the 10 millennia of settled human existence, or in terms of economic activity, if you like, our forestry cover on this planet has gone from 80% to 30%. And at the rate that we're going, which is increasing in terms of deforestation, it's going to be 10% in 2030. So it goes like that. It's the old hockey stick thing. Our soil desertification and near desertification together, that is to say land with zero productivity, is somewhere around 27 million hectares loss per year, which is a large chunk of New Zealand. Obviously our ocean acidification, thermal expansion, dead zones, coral reef decline, 10% dead, another 10% dying, and fisheries collapse. Our atmosphere, we've pumped 500 billion tonnes of carbon in with great alacrity over the last 200 years, and we've got a budgetary capacity of significantly less than half as much again, and at the rate we're going to exceed that, and the whole business of 350 and 2 degrees is where we are on the cusp of political contestation at the global level since, well actually since Rio and Kyoto, and coming to the crunch, the perfect storm at Copenhagen, which I was there to witness. We don't have time for that. So the issue, I think, is between, if we're trying to think this through, which I spend a lot of my waking hours attempting to do, the difference, the distinction between global sustainability and national sustainability. It is ironically and paradoxically, I think, easier to get a grip on global sustainability than it is national sustainability. Because global sustainability happens to be a natural biospherical entity. It's one context. And we can do the number crunching on it. And we are one species on one planet. And interacting with biodiversity, incidentally, the rate of species extinction 100 to 1,000 times above the background rate because of human activity in the Anthropocene age, as opposed to having emerged pretty much out of the Holocene age. So we can get a grasp of the unsustainability. If we use the ecological footprint, which I believe is the single best one, others criticize it, we recognize that we have an ecological overshoot of 44%, humanity on the planet right now. So we know we can grasp the state of the problem, and we can prescribe solution at the global level more easily than we can at the national level. Why? Because you have 192 nation states that are essentially have nothing to do with your natural biospherical region by and large. They're political artificers. And you are not going to get a major natural problem solved by 192 squabbling political fictions. And then if we go in and accept the political reality of 192 countries, nation states, and New Zealand being one of them, we look and we find that New Zealand is obviously relatively well off with its ecological surplus. Anything of 6 to 7 hectares per person surplus, even though our ecological footprint is way above Earth's share, and further again above the Earth share and the global footprint itself. We are nonetheless obliged to face up to the whole moral issue of whether we must reduce our ecological footprint. We wouldn't have to for New Zealand's sake alone. Do we have to for the sake of humanity and the planet? And that is not the easiest moral political challenge for any aspiring member of parliament to address in public? Do you say, yes, we must reduce it for the sake of humanity and cheerfully get voted out? Or do you say, no, we don't have to reduce it, but we have to feed the world to the tune of 18 million people. We're 4.5 million. We feed, we get more milk out of that grass by flogging it, and what's more, make a bit of national income, a few bucks on the side from China with milk. But we've got to feed, food demand's going up 50% over the next 40 years, therefore we have to feed the world. We have a moral obligation. That comes out of the mouth of the government ministers. I combat it each day, pretty much. So you have to ask yourself, do we actually have a moral obligation to feed an unsustainable global population? I'm not about to answer that question. There's a bullet from the far right coming in through the temple at this moment. I just leave it hanging in the air with a question mark. Those are the kinds of problems that we have to address when we say, well, what are we going to do about New Zealand? I have produced the Public Finance Sustainable Indicators Amendment Bill with a view to seeking to persuade the government to focus on this issue, independent of our national ecological surplus. What it would do is recognize that under the Public Finance Act, the Minister of Finance has a binding legal obligation to address certain traditional macroeconomic concepts when he, Mr. English, is presenting the budget every May. GDP, unemployment, CPI, current account balance of payments. Those things, obliged to do it. Nothing at all about sustainability, nothing at all about environmental or social indicators. My amendment bill would impose the same binding legal obligation on the Minister of Finance to have regard to a raft of 39 environmental indicators addressing population, biodiversity, land quality, air quality, water quality, biodiversity and waste management and energy. That is taken from the work that New Zealand Stats, the very, very good work that New Zealand Stats and Environment Ministry have been doing for the last 10 years on sustainable development indicators. Reach for the publication of July, August 2009 by Stats Department called Measuring New Zealand's Progress According to Sustainable Development Indicators. It's the culmination of the better part of a decade of work in cooperation with other countries around the world, the so-called London Club and so on. And Canada, we touched on Canada this morning. Norway, the New Zealanders adopted the Swiss model and adapted it in terms of capital stock and flow and structural level. These are different thematic or methodological approaches to measuring sustainability. Where the New Zealand government is at the moment, they don't determine what is sustainable. And obviously, in due course, we will have to. What they are saying is these indicators measure whether you are trending towards or away from sustainable development in this area. And there are 39 in my bill. And I think that if we can persuade the government to refer my bill when it comes out of the ballot into the Select Committee for constructive consideration, because I am putting it forward with constructive intent, and see whether there are ways, whether it's my bill itself or modified ways of having the Minister of Finance address this, instead of what the government is planning to do, which is an Environmental Reporting Act, which will be independent of your budget, so that the debate will be 3 months later in August instead of May. It'll be a different act, and we'll all have a debate about the degradation of the environment, and we'll all nod sadly, and go back to business as usual, because it won't have in the slightest bit affected your macroeconomic policy planning or your neoclassical economic model. And so we will not move, we will not change things unless and until the two are merged, your environmental planning and your economic planning. And it isn't, and I'll end on this point, it isn't, with great respect to the government and John Key and Bill English, it isn't balancing your economic opportunity with your environmental responsibilities like you're the blind scales of justice, and it's one and the other and they're about equal. That is discrete thinking and separate concepts. And if you translate that into your legislative and your executive policy, you will never solve the problem. You have to merge them, which is what my bill is about. Thanks very much. Thank you.